his talk is entitled "The Barrier to Research on Mobile." So, Daniel Cushing.
Nice. If you probably were expecting to see Bill. I'm from Passport. Presentation justice. So for the next 15 or 20 or so, to analyze what mobile research has been to date, reference to how the mobile technology industry in line with it, and sort of the processes that in which one informs the other, and what we as researchers can learn from mobile technology. When we look at the legacy of research as a mobile researcher, we really can't help but be jealous of what we see. Whether it's in-person interviews or whether it's home-based research, it's a very personal element, and the respondents can't help but feel that they're being, not only that their opinion's being heard, but it's literally being fed back on. Or with online research methodologies, we're also sort of jealousy. The medium is engaged and focused. It's a familiar medium for the respondent, and it's something that basically, because of this high-level engagement, allows significant flexibility in terms of what the content actually can be. If we focus now back out towards the overall legacy of what the mobile experience has been, effectively, the mobile research or the mobile technology industry has constantly iterated and constantly been reevaluating what it's been doing since the advent of mobile technology. And we've seen this across the operating systems and across mobile app developers. The standards of what dictate experience and how consumers engage with these platforms. And so, iOS 8, or from Android Gingerbread to Android Lollipop, or Ice Cream Sandwich to Lollipop, we've seen shifts from, say, skeuomorphic design, given in this iOS 6 Notes app example, to more flat, less tactile design. We've seen the appearance of bottom toolbar menus as a standard in mobile research, in mobile technology, shift to more sidebar menus, and then pivot back into bottom toolbar menus as it was found that side toolbar menus actually obscure too much content and hide too much of what is being done, what the app has to offer behind the fold. And Google, for instance, has, in their latest app releases, across the board, started employing dedicated hardware buttons, or software buttons, rather, that float above the app screen. So for instance, in the Gmail app, you'll see the compose new message is now a dedicated button that is on top of the content. And so what this shows is that the path to figuring out what mobile engagement is in the mobile technology industry has been iterative, and it's been something that's been constantly reevaluated and reassessed and redeployed in a way really with one question to answer, and that is, what drives engagement on a mobile device? So this is a quote from a study that we did in 2013 at Lumi called Vision 2030. What exactly is the future of market research in 2030? And obviously, the latest GRIT report has shown us that mobile adoption is increasing and that more researchers are running what they've called mobile surveys. But that adoption still isn't widespread enough. And I would assert that 100% of anyone doing research should have a mobile component, if for nothing more than representativity. So as Lumi, we look at this and we say, the question really is not of if you add or when, but it's really how you add mobile to your research mix. Because that is what dictates whether or not the experience is going to be successful. So what has mobile research been to date, and what has that experience really been defined as up to 2015? Really, it's tied to the methods of content delivery. So what we consider mobile research is really just how you're deploying that content, whether it's rendering web surveys for tablets, web surveys for smartphones, even SMS-based, that is a mobile approach and relevant in certain markets, but definitely just a way of asking questions. We've also seen native app technologies, and that's what we specialize in at Lumi, but we've seen our technologies used for, as a web survey container, basically as a method of content delivery. And then we've also seen a truly native first approach. But for the most part, I mean, you'll see this term bounced around a lot, the idea of a device agnostic survey, and that the content is originally developed for a online platform, adapted for mobile in order to accommodate mobile as a method of delivery and not as a unique engagement means. And then, of course, there's the other side of the coin in mobile research and what we could define it as, and that's the new insights and new data capture that we're able to achieve and thus achieve those insights. And I'm not here to argue that that is not a great wealth of information that can come now from the access, not only the prevalence of mobile devices in our population, but also the new data types that can be captured. I mean, I do see value in passive data collection, whether it's geo, whether it's web-based, understanding behaviors there, or whether it's just general app and phone usage statistics. You can gather truly massive amounts of information that way. And I don't disagree that geofencing, geo-triggering, photo capture, video capture, audio capture, rich media capture in general are valid methodologies. And we, as a native app technology, do this stuff ourselves. But whether it's passive and you're collecting massive amounts of data, your research question has to be very, very, very focused. And you're not allowed the flexibility to then pause and rethink your question, because really you're gathering data on the back and analyzing it on the back end. You're not focusing your research, deploying a few questions, maybe deploying a few questions afterwards. It's really about what that respondent's behavior is, and the analytics bit becomes increasingly difficult. With rich media capture and geofencing, that's all well and good, but it's still tied to the same issues of the original content problem. That the content is not necessarily being adapted, therefore tacking on an audio question or geo-triggering a survey still suffers from the same fundamental engagement problems that any mobile research does, and which I'll touch on. So I would assert that this is what you could call niche mobile research. It's not what we would say is conducting research on mobile. It's supplementing the research that you're already doing with the new methods of data capture available via mobile. So going back to the device agnostic versus a mobile first approach, what does that actually look like in terms of the experience and the content that is being displayed? Well, in a device agnostic approach, survey length is reduced. I don't think there's any agency out there that would say that survey length shouldn't be, but oftentimes it doesn't crack the single digits, or maybe it does, but it still hovers around the 9-minute mark. In terms of study explanation, the study itself, the design, is still online focused. So in terms of the amount of text and the amount of cognitive load that a respondent is receiving from having to view all that text and scroll through it, makes for a less than ideal experience on a mobile device, regardless of whether it's a tablet or a phone. And of course, you see these complex question types that are accommodated on mobile and not necessarily rethought. And I've been working for a mobile research company for the past 3 years, and the question of moving grids to mobile, nobody has cracked it, and I think ultimately that's because we're trying to take a device agnostic approach and move grids to mobile in the first place. But ultimately what this does is it casts a wide net in terms of device and in terms of the channels of delivery. You can deliver that content to anybody and any device that they may be on at any given time, but you're casting a very narrow net in terms of experience. And you're not maximizing the overall purpose of what mobile was originally intended for and what ultimately the research that you do on mobile should be trying to achieve. In a mobile-first approach, we would take a more radical approach to survey length, whether it's designing your study differently or whether it's actually just a common trope of chunking your survey to meet specific individualized tasks that have a status of completion tied to them. It's taking that long survey content and paring it down as well, either whether reducing that explanation per task or paring down the language in general to be more effective. And it's also doing away with those complex input types, not just from a let's render this on mobile so it looks okay, but from the perspective of rethinking, is this question type necessary in the way that I'm currently presenting it? So basically what mobile-first approach would do is cast a much narrower net in terms of device, but a much wider net in terms of experience, capitalizing on the mobile experience. So here's a quick example of a study that, to be honest, I would put it as a case study, but it's something that we run so frequently, it's probably not worth doing. Effectively, this is a consumption diary. It could be a consumption diary for any type of product. And what we do is we break the questionnaire into individual tasks. And the key to this is breaking the questionnaire into tasks with a clear objective that the content does not need to be completed in one sitting. Even if it's a consumption entry, a portion of that entry only needs to be answered at a given time. It's given a specific limit in terms of demarcation of completion, and a respondent, when they leave, then come back to it, see that level of completion. It reminds them and orients them in their survey. The tasks are obviously short; they're under a minute, and that is crucial. And they're interconnected, so that the completion of one of them drives the completion of another. The last bit is obviously a summary, and that's more for orientation. You must summarize and you must feedback on your respondents in order for them to know for instance, what they last completed and where they were in their stage of completion. But also, there's nothing more rewarding than instant gratification, instant feedback that you're being heard, and mimicking sort of that process that I mentioned before was part of face-to-face and telephone interviews on a mobile device. So with this, the assertion is that with mainstream adoption to date, we haven't necessarily, by taking a device-agnostic approach, been capitalizing on the benefits of mobile. Mobile response rates should be a lot higher than what we currently see, simply because of prevalence in the industry and the amount of time that people spend in aggregate on their mobile devices. And the reason why it's not is because we are not capitalizing on the way that people actually interact with their mobile devices, and we're not focusing on natural mobile app engagement. We're more accommodating mobile as a method of delivery. So the main question is, well, what is natural mobile app engagement? And in order to answer that question, you really have to look at, how do our respondents expect to be engaged with a mobile device, and how should an app engage them? So this is data from a mobile marketing automation company called Swerve in their 2014 report. And they found that 34.1% of all app sessions, which is essentially app opening to close with a little bit of downtime in terms of inactivity in that app, they found that 34.1% of that lasts under 1 minute. And that if you look at the rest of the data and add it up, over 70% are under 5 minutes. And you'll see a bit of an outlier at the end of the 10%, and they actually found that those are more music apps. That's where that timeout doesn't necessarily happen, because when they go back to, when you start playing a song, you maybe want to change it later, you come back to it, and that doesn't constitute a period of inactivity enough to justify a session. So that's more of an outlier in the data in terms of the type of app. And so that type of app question got us thinking, well, how do people engage with mobile survey apps? This is the kind of analysis that we do all the time, but don't necessarily share too often. So we obviously have a lot of survey apps out there, and this is more of an aggregate about it. How do our panelists that use our application engage with it? And we found that the problem is actually significantly worse, if you think of it as a problem, on a Lumi survey application. We see 80% of sessions are under 1 minute, compared to that 34.1 from Swerve. And so that got us interested, what are people doing in that time? And we looked at the screens that they're looking at in the app. And we saw that over 80% of sessions are under 1 minute. And they're checking, in that 1 minute, they're checking rewards. They're checking, taking short surveys, answering polls, but they're also dropping out of the long studies. And when we look at that drop-off, we see is that it starts around the 60-second mark. So this is a chart of the percentage of incompletes, basically the percentage of people who've started a survey and quit it versus the length of time it takes to actually submit a complete. And the instability begins around 60 seconds, and at about 5 minutes, it gets significantly worse. In 12 minutes, it's consistently you're accepting a large percentage of your overall entries and overall data submitted to be half complete, and that the respondent is no longer going to participate in that study. So really, none of this should be new. When you look at the data from our app or whether from Swerve, you think about how you naturally engage with a mobile device. But for the most part, we aren't looking at our phones for 10, 15-minute spans. And this is not meant to be a revolutionary idea or something that you haven't heard before. But what I'm advocating is that by taking a more modest approach to the question of survey length, it's indicative of the overall problem that we're not thinking about research in a truly mobile-first way. And that the question of 15 minutes versus 5 minutes for a survey length is an irrelevant question if a respondent is dropping out in the first minute. It's not necessarily going to drive more completion. So what's next? What I've said before, it still holds true, that the mobile technology industry has constantly iterated. And those expectations mature in terms of how you expect to engage and how consumers expect to engage in a mobile app. And we need, as researchers, to begin to accommodate that and begin to take that into our own perspective. That stochastic interaction, that is just one level in which respondents are expecting to be engaged with on a mobile device. And there, as the mobile technology industry has shown us, are significantly more that we are simply ignoring by trying to accommodate online and mobile. And we can't be myopic, we can't be short-sighted to think that just by adapting survey length we're actually accommodating online research on a mobile device. So obviously the title of this presentation probably didn't make too much sense in reference to what I started talking about at the beginning, but our assertion is that by taking this modest approach to mobile research and this accommodating approach, the most significant barrier to mobile research has actually been, or to conducting research on mobile has actually been the way we've defined mobile research today and what constitutes it. Not just from a bad panelist experience in terms of the actual content that they do get being too Herculean to actually complete in a given amount of time that people are actually engaging with a mobile device, but that we've become complacent as an industry in terms of that we're doing mobile research, that what we're doing constitutes good enough. And we need to charge ourselves to be better. And so Lumi, in combination with various technology partners, that's what we're trying to achieve. We're trying to take a focus on the experience from a panelist first perspective in order to best maximize what research could be. And I'm not talking about niche research, and I'm not talking about a new research method. I'm talking about surveys with a panelist first experience and what that could be and the way of maximizing that engagement and the prevalence of mobile in our daily lives. So yeah, I don't have a thank you slide, but that's the end there.
Thank you, Daniel. Questions? JD?
So what is Lumi doing?
So we're looking to build a mobile-first panel. That's the idea. We don't necessarily want to be panel owners, but we do want to have access to panel. And through technological means, we have the means to dictate what that experience can be. And
so let's get to, because the problem isn't actually sort of the awareness that we need to do this. The problem ends up being a research design problem. So is Lumi taking any steps to address the research design problem?
To us, it's less about changing the research design than accommodating it in a method of delivery so that when you have your long study, what we'd like to do is do that for you. Take that chunking, display it to respondents in the way that they're expecting it, and then when they complete it, you analyze the data on the back end and find that it's the same. And that there is no difference between, in terms of it from a data perspective, what you get and what, from a continuous linear survey and a more modular approach or chunked approach.
More questions? Right here.
Hi. Help me understand what's the barrier, or from your point of view, what's the barrier that prevents us doing more audio? People interact with Cortana and Siri, and people say, OK, Google, blah, blah, blah. So moving the grid and all that, what's the barrier for going more audio?
I think the main barrier to going more audio from an analytical approach is that right now, Apple and Siri, they haven't developed APIs for that technology. So, and without a doubt, Siri is one of the better voice recognition softwares out there in terms of feeding back on it. We can't tap into that. So ultimately, you're forced with using a third-party tool. And if you try to cut out Apple, then you're getting 50%, in the US at least, about of the market share there. But again, what I would advocate more is it's a problem of engagement and less a problem of capturing more audio and that being more effective and more easily usable. I think it's if you want to integrate an audio portion to your study design, that it be not just tied to an active survey that suffers from the same issues that any other survey content being adapted for mobile does.
Okay, thanks, Daniel.
Thank you.